My son said at dinner, "You're a loser, Mom's husband isn't." I took back his house. At our family table, with the smell of roast chicken still in the air, my 30-year-old son slammed down his fork and shouted at me in front of his sister. "You're a loser, Dad. Mom's new husband is the real man." His words cut through me like a knife, and for the first time I stayed silent. That night I made a choice that would turn his whole world upside down. Stay with me until the end, because what happened next will leave you speechless. The roast chicken still carried its warmth when I set it on the table that night. The smell of garlic and herbs filled the house, and for a moment it felt almost normal. Claire had been talking about her new project at work, her voice light and steady, while Michael sat across from me, stabbing at his potatoes like they had wronged him. I tried to ignore his sharp movements, tried to keep the conversation easy, just like any other spring evening in our little Ohio town. The window by the table was open, letting in a soft breeze that carried the smell of freshly cut grass. I lifted my glass of water and looked at my children. Claire smiled at me the way she always did, that gentle smile that had gotten me through more than she realized. Michael, though, he wore a frown as if he was waiting for the right moment to strike. And he did. He slammed his fork down so hard the sound snapped through the air. Then he looked at me, his eyes burning with something I could not quite name. "You are a loser, Dad. But Mom's new husband, Victor, he is not. He knows how to win. He is the kind of man I respect." The words hit me like a blow to the chest. My grip on the glass tightened, and I felt the cold sweat of condensation slip between my fingers. For a second I thought I might drop it. My throat closed, but I did not say a word. My silence was my shield, though inside I was torn apart. Claire gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Her chair squeaked as she leaned forward, eyes wide, voice trembling but fierce. "Michael, that is not fair. Dad has been here for us our whole lives. He built this family when no one else would. You are being cruel." Michael sneered, pushing his plate away so hard it nearly toppled over the edge. "Cruel? Look at him, 62 and still sweating on construction sites, barely scraping by. Victor drives new cars, closes big deals, and takes Mom on trips. He is successful. Dad is just average. I should start calling Victor my father. At least he knows what that word means." The sound of his chair scraping back cut through me worse than his words. He stood tall, towering in his own mind, and I stayed rooted in my seat. My jaw locked tight. I felt the memory of years flash through me like a film. The nights I worked overtime so he would not have to worry about rent. The mornings I drove him to job interviews he did not take seriously. The day I bought him his first truck because he swore he just needed a chance. Claire turned to me, her eyes full of pain, and she reached across the table to squeeze my hand. "Don't listen to him, Dad. He does not mean it. You are the best father anyone could ask for." Her voice was steady, but I could feel the tremor in her touch. Michael laughed, a bitter laugh that carried no joy. "Family? You keep talking about family, but Dad has been holding me back my whole life. Victor is the one with real advice, real opportunities. Dad is just obsolete." He yanked his jacket from the chair and stormed toward the door, each step heavy, leaving marks in the air as if he wanted me to feel every ounce of his anger. Claire followed, her voice softer now. "I will talk to him later. I love you, Dad." She hugged me quickly and left with him, the door closing with a dull thud that echoed through the house. I sat alone at the table, staring at the half-eaten plates, the chicken cooling, the smell of herbs now mixed with bitterness. The family picture on the wall caught my eye. It was from a summer long ago, the four of us at a picnic, smiling like we had the world. That was before everything cracked, before Victor stepped into the picture. My hand trembled on the glass. The clock ticked in the corner, the seconds dragging. I could still hear Michael's voice in my ears, calling me a loser. I had given him more than I had ever kept for myself. I had built him a life, and tonight he spit on it. I stayed silent because words would not have mattered in that moment. I did not rise to clear the dishes. I did not move at all. I let the weight of what he said sink into me like a stone dropped in water, ripples spreading through every memory I had carried for him. The anger sat there, heavy, growing sharper with every breath. And yet, beneath that anger was something else, something colder, stronger, a decision forming. Michael had crossed a line, and I would not let him walk over me again. I sat in that silence, the night air drifting in, and knew that everything had changed. After the door closed behind them, the house felt too big. The air turned heavy, as if the walls themselves had absorbed Michael's words, and were now echoing them back at me. I sat at the table staring at the plates, the mashed potatoes congealing, the chicken's skin turning dull, the gravy thickening into cold lumps. I could hear the refrigerator humming, the clock ticking, and nothing else. It was the kind of silence that presses on your chest. I pushed my chair back slowly and stood, the weight of the day hanging on my shoulders. My knees ached, and I told myself it was the years of construction work, but I knew the pain went deeper. I gathered a few plates, set them in the sink, then stopped. The smell of garlic and herbs lingered, but no longer comforted me. It reminded me of the effort I had put in, the care I still tried to show, and how little it mattered to Michael. I leaned on the counter and let my eyes drift to the family photo pinned on the fridge. Claire was only a teenager in that picture, braces on her teeth, still laughing freely. Michael was young too, his arm slung over my shoulder, the same arm that now pointed blame at me across a dinner table. I could hardly recognize that boy in the man who called me obsolete. My chest tightened as if I had been robbed of someone who was still standing a few feet away. I turned off the kitchen light and let the house stay dim. Moving through the living room, my hand brushed the edge of the worn armchair, the fabric rough under my fingers. I sat down for a moment, sinking into the familiar cushion. The lamp beside me gave off a soft glow, catching dust motes in the air. I thought about all the nights I had come home late, covered in sweat and drywall dust, falling into this chair with nothing but exhaustion. Those nights were not wasted. They built the life Michael grew up in. And yet tonight he had thrown all of it back in my face. I reached for the drawer in the end table, pulling it open with a slow scrape. Inside were old bills, pay stubs, receipts, proof of the hours and dollars I had poured into keeping everything afloat. I picked up one faded envelope, a car insurance statement from years ago. I remembered signing the check with aching hands, making sure Michael could keep driving the truck I had bought him. My throat burned. All those sacrifices, invisible now. I set the paper back, closed the drawer, and stood. The air in the house was stale, heavy with resentment, so I walked to the back door and slid it open. The night met me with cool air and the faint scent of cut grass. The yard stretched quietly under the stars, the neighbor's porch light casting a pale glow on the fence. I stepped out onto the deck, the wood creaking under my weight, and drew in a long breath. Above me the sky was scattered with stars. They reminded me of nights long ago when Michael was just a boy. We used to sit on this very deck, him pointing at constellations he had read about in a library book, me listening with pride. Those were good nights, full of hope. I closed my eyes and the memory slipped away, leaving only the cold truth of what had been said tonight. I lowered myself into the old patio chair. The paint chipped, the arms rough under my palms. I sat there, listening to the distant sound of a dog barking, a car passing on the road beyond the neighborhood. My thoughts circled back to Michael's words. Loser, obsolete. Each one twisted deeper, but as the pain turned, it sharpened into something else. I could feel it hardening inside me. I thought about all the years since the divorce, all the times Linda praised Victor's so-called success while I paid braces, tuition, rent. I thought about Michael holding out his hand for more, never once thinking to ask if I had enough left for myself. I thought about Claire, standing up for me tonight, her voice steady, trying to remind her brother of the truth. The night was quiet, but inside me something shifted. The silence gave me space to see it clearly. I had allowed this to go on too long. I had mistaken sacrifice for love and enabling for kindness. Michael thought Victor was strong because he flashed wealth and promises, but real strength had been sitting at this table for years, working unseen. I took another breath of the night air and let the coolness settle into my lungs. My anger was no longer wild. It was steady, deliberate, like a blade being sharpened. I would not yell or plead. I would not keep pouring into an empty well. Michael would learn the weight of his choices. I sat there until the stars blurred with the first hint of dawn. The chair groaned as I finally rose. I turned back toward the house, lights still glowing softly through the windows, and I felt a calm resolve settle over me. Everything had changed tonight. From now on, things would be different. I could not sleep that night. The anger had burned itself down into something quieter but heavier, like a weight pressing on my chest. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling fan, its slow turning blades barely stirring the air. My thoughts kept circling back to Michael, to the way he had looked at me across the table, as if I were nothing but an obstacle in his life. The word loser still echoed in my ears. I turned onto my side, but instead of drifting off, my mind carried me back to a memory I had tried to bury. It was years ago, not long after the divorce. Michael was fresh out of college, though he had not stayed long enough to finish a degree. He was 21 then, restless and uncertain, already blaming the world for closing doors on him. Linda had just remarried Victor, and Michael was caught up in his flash. Victor had taken him to fancy restaurants, showed off his sports cars, and promised him the world. I was afraid I was losing my son even then. I remember the day I bought him his first truck. It was not anything shiny, a used Ford with a few dents in the side, but solid. I had gone to the dealership after a 12-hour shift, my clothes still marked with dust from the job site. The salesman looked at me like I did not belong there, but I ignored it. I had counted every dollar, saved overtime checks, skipped things for myself so I could do this for him. I signed the papers with pride, imagining the way Michael's face would light up when he saw it. When I pulled into the driveway with the truck, I even tied a red ribbon around the hood. It felt silly, but I wanted him to feel special, to know I believed in him. He came out with his hands in his pockets, hair still messy from sleeping in late. I grinned, told him, "This is for you, son." A start, something reliable. He shrugged, barely looked at it, and muttered, "Thanks, I guess." Then he added under his breath, "Victor has a Mercedes." Those words cut deeper than I let on. I smiled weakly, pretended I had not heard, but inside I felt small. Still, I handed him the keys. I told myself that maybe one day he would see it differently, that maybe one day he would understand what that truck had cost me, not just in money but in hours of my life. I watched him drive away that first time, his arm hanging out the window, music blasting too loud. I wanted to believe it was freedom for him, that he would use it to find a job, to build something steady. But the months rolled on, and nothing changed. The payments for insurance came out of my pocket, the repairs too. He called me when the brakes squealed, when the tires wore down, when the check engine light flashed. Each time I paid, telling myself it was just to get him through until he found his way. But he never did. Instead, he spent nights bragging about Victor's new deals, about the trips Victor and Linda took to Florida, about the new house they bought with a pool. I listened, nodded, and swallowed the sting. I kept hoping Michael would see that love was not about luxury, that real support was built in sacrifice. I remember one winter morning the truck broke down on the side of the highway. Michael called me furious, shouting that I had given him junk. I left work, tools in hand, and stood in the freezing wind fixing that truck while he sat in the cab with the heater running. My fingers were numb, my breath sharp, but I got it started again. When I slid into the driver's seat to take it back to the shop, he barely looked up from his phone. That was the moment I should have seen it clearly. He had stopped valuing what I gave him. He had stopped seeing me at all. And yet, I kept giving. I kept pouring from a well that never filled. Lying there in the dark, the memory made my chest ache. That truck had been a symbol. To me it was a gift of faith, a promise that I believed in him. To him, it was just another thing to measure against Victor's wealth. And now, years later, he still measured me against that man. He had not changed. I turned onto my back and stared at the ceiling. I could almost hear the crunch of gravel under those tires, see the way Michael had driven off without looking back. It struck me that I had been living in that moment ever since, repeating it over and over. I gave. He dismissed, and I stayed silent. But not anymore. The memory hurt, but it also cleared the fog. I could not erase the past, but I could decide what came next. If Michael thought Victor was the better man, then let Victor carry him. I had done enough. The next time I handed over keys, they would not be his to keep. The sun was barely up when I pulled my old pickup into Michael's neighborhood. The air was sharp with early morning chill, and a thin mist clung to the lawns. I parked at the curb in front of his house, the one I had bought for him years ago when he promised he just needed stability. The house looked tired, curtains drawn, weeds pushing through cracks in the driveway. But the truck, the same Ford I had given him, sat gleaming in the driveway. I had kept it running, paid for tune-ups, new tires, repairs. It purred because of me, not him. I stepped out of my pickup, boots crunching on the gravel. Each step toward the door felt heavier, but also steadier. I knocked 3 times, hard enough to echo. Inside I heard shuffling, then the sound of the lock turning. Michael opened the door, hair a mess, eyes bleary from another late night. He squinted at me. "Dad, what are you doing here this early?" His voice was thick, irritated. I didn't bother with pleasantries. "I'm here for the keys, Michael. Hand them over." For a second he just stared at me, like he thought he misheard. Then he laughed, a short, bitter laugh. "What? No way. That's my truck. You gave it to me." I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out the folded registration papers. The paper was creased from being carried too long, but the ink was clear. I held it up between us. "It's in my name. Every payment, every repair, every insurance bill has come out of my pocket. This truck has never been yours. It's mine, and I'm taking it back." His face darkened. He gripped the door frame and leaned forward, lowering his voice to a growl. "You can't just show up and take it. That's theft." I took a step closer, close enough to smell the stale beer on his breath. "No, son. Theft is keeping what doesn't belong to you. Give me the keys, or I call the police. Right now. Let them sort it out." His eyes darted to the truck in the driveway, then back to me. He looked like a cornered animal, anger and fear mixing in his expression. Behind me, I noticed a neighbor across the street pause in her yard, hose dangling in her hand as she pretended to water flowers. She was watching. The whole street would be talking if this dragged on. Michael cursed under his breath and disappeared inside, leaving the door half open. I heard him slam drawers, muttering loud enough for me to catch pieces. "Low, Dad, real low. Victor's right about you." When he returned, the keys dangled from his hand. His fingers trembled as he shoved them into my palm. "Fine, take it. But this is pathetic. You'll regret this. Victor says you're just bitter because Mom moved on." I closed my hand around the keys. They felt heavier than they should have, like they carried every year of disappointment. I didn't rise to his bait. I just turned and walked down the steps. Sliding into the driver's seat, I let the familiar leather press against me. I turned the key, and the engine came to life with a smooth hum, thanks to the repairs I had paid for. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Michael standing on the porch, arms crossed, fury twisting his face. As I backed out of the driveway, I caught his reflection in the side mirror. He grew smaller as the truck rolled onto the street, but the fire in his eyes stayed with me. I could feel his anger chasing me, but for the first time in years, I didn't feel guilty. The road stretched ahead, lined with budding trees and quiet houses waking to the day. I gripped the wheel tighter, the keys still warm from his hand resting heavy in my pocket. I felt a rush of something I hadn't felt in years. Control. The truck drove like it was always meant to be mine. The gears shifted smoothly, the tires gripped steady. I thought of the hours I had bent my back for this, the sacrifices hidden in its steel. And now it was back where it belonged. Still, as I pulled away from his street, a question gnawed at me. What would he do without it? I pictured him pacing inside, calling Victor, ranting about how unfair I was. Maybe he would lash out, maybe he would beg. Either way, he would finally feel what it meant to stand without my hand holding him up. I drove toward town, the morning sun climbing higher. For the first time in a long time, I let myself breathe deep. The truck hummed beneath me, steady and reliable, like it always had been. My jaw loosened, but my mind stayed sharp. This was only the first step. There were bigger things I still had to take back. The truck was parked outside the bank when I cut the engine. I sat there for a moment, staring through the windshield at the brick building, the glass doors just unlocking for the day. My hands rested on the steering wheel, knuckles white, heart steady but heavy. Taking back the truck had been one thing. Cutting off the house payments was another. That house was supposed to be Michael's fresh start, the foundation I thought would set him on his feet. Instead, it had become another chain tied around my neck. I stepped out and walked across the lot, the morning air cool against my skin. The glass doors slid open with a soft whoosh, and I stepped into the hushed lobby. The smell of coffee drifted from somewhere behind the counter. A young teller with neat hair looked up and offered me a polite smile. "Good morning, sir." "How can I help you?" I pulled the folder from under my arm, its edges worn from years of carrying too many papers. Inside were the mortgage documents, statements, and the automatic payment forms. I spread them on the counter with care. My voice was steady when I said, "I need to stop the payments on this mortgage. The arrangement has changed." She scanned the documents, her fingers tapping the keyboard. "All right, we'll need you to sign a cancellation form. The account is under your name, so it should be straightforward." As she worked, my mind slipped back to the day I had first signed those papers. Michael had sat beside me in the real estate office, scrolling on his phone, barely paying attention. I had been the one sweating through every signature, the one who carried the down payment scraped from overtime hours and years of saving. He had promised me this was the turning point, that he just needed stability. I had believed him. The teller printed out a form and slid it across the counter. "Once you sign here, the automatic transfers will stop. Notices will be sent to the resident within a few days." I picked up the pen, its weight solid in my hand. I hesitated for just a breath, long enough to feel the years of sacrifice wash over me. Then I signed with a firm stroke, the ink flowing smooth, final. I handed it back, and the teller stamped it with a neat click. "It's all set," she said. "The payments will end this month." I nodded, gathered my papers, and stepped aside. My phone buzzed in my pocket before I even reached the door. Michael's name flashed across the screen. I answered, holding the phone tight to my ear. "Dad, what the hell?" His voice exploded before I could speak. "The bank just called. They said the payments are stopping. You're evicting me? This is my house." I kept my tone even. "It's my house, Michael. My name on the deed. My money keeping it afloat. You were never a tenant on paper, just a guest, and I've paid enough." His breath came ragged, filled with fury and fear. "You can't do this. Where am I supposed to go? You're ruining my life over one comment at dinner." "One comment?" I repeated, my voice sharp now. "This isn't about one comment. It's years of me carrying you while you looked the other way. Years of me working while you praised Victor. This ends now." There was a long silence, broken only by his uneven breathing. Then he pleaded, his voice cracking. "Wait, Dad, let's talk. I didn't mean it. Dylan's been helping me, but please don't do this. Don't cut me off." I felt the weight of his words pressing against me, but I didn't bend. "You've had years to stand on your own. You chose not to. Now it's time to learn." I ended the call before he could say more. The click was final, but his desperation lingered in my ears. Walking out of the bank, the sunlight hit me squarely, warm and sharp. I took a breath, let it fill me. The folder was tucked back under my arm, its papers like a shield. For the first time in a long while, I felt like I was no longer chained to promises I never made. Driving home, the road curved along the river, the water glinting under the morning Sunday. My hands gripped the wheel, steady and sure. I thought about Michael's voice, frantic and angry. I thought about how he would run to Victor now, how Victor would use this moment to tighten his hold. But I also knew something Michael didn't. Support given without respect is poison, and I had finally stopped pouring. When I pulled into my driveway, I cut the engine and sat in the quiet. The house stood still in front of me, modest but mine, every brick earned by my hands. I stepped inside, set the folder on the kitchen counter, and poured myself a cup of coffee. The steam rose in slow curls, carrying the smell that reminded me of steady mornings after long nights of work. I sipped it, steady and calm. The house payments were done. The line had been drawn, and I knew the storm was only beginning. The coffee in my cup had gone cold by the time my phone lit up again. I almost didn't answer. I had no strength left for another shouting match, not after the call with Michael. But when I saw Claire's name on the screen, I picked it up right away. Her voice came fast, shaky, like she had been holding her breath for too long. "Dad, I just got off the phone with Michael. He's furious. He said you're cutting him off completely. He kept going on and on about Victor stepping in to help, and Dad, you need to be careful. I don't like what I heard." I set the mug down on the counter and leaned against it, bracing myself. "Tell me exactly what he said." She hesitated, and I could hear the worry in her silence. Then her words tumbled out. "He said Victor promised to cover the house for a while, but only if Michael agrees to stop talking to you. He called it a clean break. And Dad," Victor laughed. "Michael told me he laughed about it, said you've been a pushover too long and it's time somebody taught you a lesson." The words sank deep. I turned to look out the kitchen window, the yard bathed in afternoon light. The grass was bright, the trees swaying in a soft breeze, but everything looked colder somehow. I kept my voice even. "Victor wants him all to himself. That's what this has been about all along." Claire's voice softened, but it trembled at the edges. "Dad, I don't trust him. I think he's using Michael, feeding his anger to get to you. Please, promise me you'll be careful." I rubbed my hand over my face, the rough stubble scratching my palm. "I hear you, sweetheart. Don't worry about me. Just tell me everything he said." "He said Victor has real opportunities lined up. Some business thing." He made it sound like Victor was holding the keys to his future, and you were just in the way. And when I tried to remind him of everything you've done, he snapped at me, said I was blind, that Victor was the man who knew how to win. He even said he was done calling you Dad. Her voice broke on that word, and I felt something tighten in my chest. I walked into the living room, the floorboards creaking under my steps. The old family photo still hung above the mantel. I stared at it while Claire kept talking. Michael's smile in that picture was wide, unburdened, nothing like the twisted anger I had seen in his eyes lately. "Dad, I'm scared he's slipping away from us," she said softly, "and I don't know how to reach him anymore. Victor's filling his head with poison. He's making you out to be the enemy, when all you've ever done is give." I lowered myself into the armchair, the fabric sagging with the weight of my body. "He'll learn, Claire. One way or another he'll learn. Victor may think he can handle me, but he's mistaken. He's not the first man to underestimate me." There was silence on the line for a few seconds. Then she whispered, "You sound different, Dad." I closed my eyes, letting the quiet of the house press in. "I am different. Something changed at that dinner table. I won't be his crutch anymore. If Victor wants him so badly, he can carry the weight I've carried for years, but I won't let them break me." I heard her breathe in slowly, like she was trying to calm herself. "I'll stand with you. You're not alone in this." Her words warmed me, cutting through the bitterness for just a moment. "Thank you, sweetheart. That means more than you know." After we hung up, I stayed in that chair, staring at the photo until my eyes blurred. The house was quiet, the ticking clock the only sound. But my mind was loud, full of Victor's smug grin, Michael's betrayal, and Claire's warning. I knew then that the battle wasn't just between me and my son. Victor was behind every insult, every dismissal, every poisonous word Michael had thrown at me. He had been pulling the strings from the shadows, and now he was bold enough to show his hand. I rose from the chair and walked to the window. Outside, children were riding their bikes along the street. Their laughter carried on the breeze. Life went on, simple and bright, while mine turned darker by the day. I pressed my hand against the glass, feeling the cool surface under my palm. Victor thought I was weak, that I would keep bending until I snapped. But he had no idea how much strength is born from years of sacrifice. He had no idea what it means to build with your own hands, to endure and keep standing when everything else falls apart. Claire's words echoed in my ears. Be careful, and I would be, but I would also be ready. The next move wouldn't be Michael's, and it sure as hell wouldn't be Victor's. It would be mine. It was just after sunset when the phone rang again. I had been sitting at the kitchen table. The old folder of documents spread in front of me, papers marked with dates and numbers that told the story of years spent paying for someone else's comfort. The ring startled me, sharp and insistent in the quiet house. I looked at the screen and saw Linda's name. My chest tightened. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something in me wanted to hear what she would say. The moment I answered, her voice came rushing through, high and frantic. Robert, what on earth are you doing? Michael is beside himself. He says you took his truck, stopped the house payments. Have you lost your mind? Her tone was sharp, but beneath it I heard something else, a crack of fear she was trying to hide. I gripped the edge of the table, steadying myself. Hello to you too, Linda. I haven't lost anything. I just took back what's mine. The truck I paid for, the house I've been covering for years. That's not losing my mind. That's waking up. She scoffed, her voice cutting through the line. He's your son. You can't just throw him out like this. He needs stability. Victor and I are worried sick. You've gone too far this time. At the mention of Victor, I felt the heat rise in my chest. I walked a slow circle around the kitchen, my steps measured to keep my voice calm. Don't pretend this is about concern. Victor's been whispering in his ear for years, telling him I'm nothing, telling him you traded up. You think I don't know what's going on? He's been pushing Michael against me to tighten his grip. She hesitated then, and the silence on the line stretched. When she spoke again, her voice had softened, almost pleading. Robert, you don't understand. Victor has been helping Michael with some opportunities. Business loans, investments. Michael signed papers. If you cut him off now, if those payments stop, it could get messy. Victor said he'll step in, but only if you back off. I stopped in the middle of the room, my hand tightening on the back of the chair. What papers? What did Michael sign? She faltered, her words stumbling. I don't know all the details. Victor mentioned co-signing for a loan, some startup idea. He said it was a good chance for Michael to finally grow up, but it needed your support to look solid. He thought you'd just keep covering the house and car like always. Now you're pulling out, and Victor says it could hurt Michael's credit, maybe worse. Her confession hit me like ice water. My son had been led into signing something he didn't understand, and Victor had been standing right there, smiling while it happened. My jaw tightened until it ached. I forced my voice to stay calm. So that's what this is about. Victor needed my steady payments to prop up his little scheme. He used Michael to get his claws into me, and you went along with it. Don't twist this, she snapped, though her voice shook. Victor is trying to help him, to give him a future. You're the one tearing it all down. If you cared about Michael, you'd put your pride aside and make this right. Stop this before it's too late. I let out a breath, slow and controlled. If I cared about him? Linda, I've carried that boy for decades. I've bled for him. You think Victor's checks and promises mean more than the years I spent working with my back breaking just to keep him afloat? You traded love for flash, and now Michael is paying the price. Her voice cracked, dropping to a whisper. Robert, please, for old time's sake. Just think about it. Michael is threatening to cut you out completely if you don't fix this. You'll lose him forever. Ugh. I looked at the family photo still hanging on the wall, the four of us smiling under a summer sky that felt like another lifetime. My throat tightened, but my resolve did not waver. If that's what he wants, then that's his choice. I won't let Victor hold me hostage with my own sacrifices. This ends here." There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end. Then she said quietly, "You'll regret this, Robert. Victor says you don't know who you're up against." And just like that, the line went dead. I stood there in the silence, the phone still in my hand, the hum of the refrigerator filling the room again. I set the phone down and opened the folder on the table. The documents stared back at me, reminders of every bill I had paid, every signature that tied me to obligations Michael never carried. Now I knew Victor's game, and I knew what was at stake. The fear that had tried to creep in from Linda's call hardened into something else. Determination. If Victor thought he could use my son to trap me, he had just made the worst mistake of his life. The next morning I woke with a weight pressing on my chest. Sleep had been thin and restless, broken by flashes of Michael's anger and Linda's frantic voice. I stared at the ceiling for a long time before I finally swung my legs over the edge of the bed. The house was quiet, the kind of quiet that makes you hear every creak of the floor and hum of the furnace. I poured myself a quick cup of coffee but left it half full on the counter. I knew what I had to do. I drove across town to a modest brick office on the edge of Main Street. The sign outside still bore the same name it had for years. Hayes and Burke, attorneys at law. I had known Tom Hayes since we were young men starting out, me with a hammer in my hand and him with law books under his arm. He had handled a few contract disputes for me back when I was running small crews, and I trusted him. When I walked inside, the smell of paper and brewed coffee mixed in the air. The receptionist gave me a nod and waved me toward his office. Tom stood as I entered, his frame lean but still sturdy, his gray hair trimmed neat, wire-rimmed glasses perched on his nose. He extended his hand. "Robert, it's been a while. Sit down and tell me what kind of storm you've walked into." I took a seat across from him, the chair creaking under me. I placed the folder of documents on his desk, spreading out the deeds, the mortgage papers, the car registration, and a few bank statements. My voice was steady, though my hands felt tight. "Tom, I've pulled back everything I've been paying for Michael. The truck, the house. He's furious, and Linda's already hinting at lawyers. Victor is behind it, pushing him, maybe even getting him to sign papers he doesn't understand. I need to know where I stand and how to protect myself." Tom leaned back, adjusting his glasses as he scanned the papers. His pen tapped lightly against the desk. "Smart of you to come now instead of later. Let's take this piece by piece. The truck is clear. Registration is in your name. Every payment tied to your accounts. If he tries to claim it, he doesn't have a leg to stand on. The house, though, that's where it could get noisy. Your name on the deed and mortgage means you're the legal owner. He's not a tenant by contract, so technically he's been living there at your allowance. That gives you the right to end it." I nodded, the tension in my shoulders easing a fraction. "Linda said they're talking about emotional distress, that I'm being cruel." Tom gave a dry laugh. "They can talk all they want. Cruelty doesn't hold up in court when the documents show you've been carrying everything for years. If they push, we counter with a record of support bank transfers, receipts, even the car insurance you've paid. Judges don't look kindly on grown children living rent-free while the parent shoulders every expense. As for Victor, well, that's another matter." I leaned forward, my elbows on my knees. "What about him?" Tom sifted through another set of papers, then pulled out a thin folder of his own. "I did some digging last year when a client mentioned his name. Victor's businesses have some tax irregularities. Nothing explosive yet, but enough to raise eyebrows if someone were to nudge the right agency. He's slick, Robert, but slick men often leave trails." The words sent a current through me. I thought of the way Victor had walked into my family's life with expensive gifts and false promises, the way Michael hung on his every word. To know there were cracks in his empire lit a spark in me I hadn't felt in years. Tom tapped the papers in front of him. "Here's my advice. File for a formal notice to end Michael's occupancy. That forces the situation into the open, and it will show you're serious. At the same time, keep every scrap of proof of what you've paid over the years. If they try to sue, We counter with repayment claims. As for Victor, you let me handle the letters. A cease and desist if he tries to meddle in your affairs directly. And if he escalates, well, we have leverage of our own. Oh, I sat back, the chair groaning under my weight, and let his words sink in. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I wasn't standing alone against the storm. I looked at Tom, his sharp eyes steady on mine, and nodded. Do it. File whatever you need to file. I'm done being their silent provider. He gathered the documents, stacking them neatly. It'll take a few days to get everything in motion, but we'll start today. Be ready, though. When a man like Victor feels his grip slipping, he doesn't go quietly. I rose from the chair, gripping his hand firmly across the desk. I've been quiet for too long. Let's see how he handles the sound of me standing my ground. As I left the office, the spring sun glared off the windshield of my truck. I slid behind the wheel and rested my hands on the steering wheel for a moment, feeling the hum of purpose running through me. The fight was no longer just about Michael's disrespect. It was about reclaiming everything Victor thought he had stolen. I started the engine, the rumble steady, and drove away knowing the next moves would be mine. The following day I drove across town to see Ellen, the accountant I had trusted for years. Her office sat above a hardware store on Main Street, the kind of place that smelled faintly of old wood and ink. I had taken blueprints to her back when I still dreamed of starting my own small construction company, and she had been the one to remind me to keep every receipt, every stub, every scrap of proof. I carried that same folder with me now, thicker than it had ever been. She looked up from her desk as I entered, her glasses sliding down her nose. Robert, it's been too long. Sit down. You look like you're carrying bricks on your shoulders. Oh, I set the folder on her desk and eased myself into the chair. Feels like more than bricks. I need you to take a hard look at this. And at Victor. Her brows lifted slightly at the name, but she opened the folder and began flipping through the documents. Her fingers moved quickly across her keyboard, pulling up records, typing notes. The tapping of keys filled the room while I sat still, my hands folded in my lap, my eyes fixed on the dust dancing in the sunlight through the blinds. She glanced up after a few minutes. You've been carrying everything for Michael. Insurance, mortgage payments, utilities, repairs. There's a clear paper trail. If this goes to court, it'll show he's had no financial independence. That's good for you, but as for Victor, she turned her screen slightly so I could see. His firm has filings that don't add up. I'm seeing deductions that don't match the revenue he reports. He's shifted assets between shell companies more than once. That's the kind of thing that catches the IRS's eye. I leaned closer, my chest tightening. So he's not untouchable. Ellen shook her head. Far from it. Slick, yes, but not careful enough. If someone were to submit these irregularities to the right places, it would spark an audit. And when audits start, men like him scramble. Her words struck something deep in me. I thought of Victor's grin at family gatherings, the way he had handed Michael expensive watches and whispered promises about building empires. I thought of the time he had cut me down in front of Linda, saying I built houses while he built futures. The taste of that humiliation had never left me. Show me exactly what you see, I said. She printed out a stack of pages, highlighting lines where expenses had been exaggerated, where deductions didn't match, where property transfers raised questions. These are red flags. If you're thinking of protecting yourself, this is leverage. You don't even need to attach your name. There are anonymous reporting channels. The IRS is very fond of tips that lead to revenue. I studied the papers, the ink crisp against the white sheets. Each line felt like a crack in Victor's foundation. He had built his empire on sand, and I could feel the tide starting to shift. Ellen leaned back, folding her hands. But Robert, you need to be certain. Once this starts, it doesn't stop. He'll know someone exposed him, and he'll look your way. Are you ready for that? I sat in silence for a long moment, the faint hum of the fluorescent lights filling the space. Then I nodded. He's been hiding behind charm and money while using my son as a pawn. It's time he faces what real accountability looks like. She gave me a steady look. Then here's what we do. Secure your retirement funds first. Move them into accounts he can't touch through Michael. Freeze any open credits tied to Michael's name. Then, when you're ready, you submit the report. I jotted notes as she spoke, my handwriting sharp and deliberate. Freeze credits. Protect retirement. File anonymous report. Each word steadied me, like laying down bricks for a wall I should have built years ago. When I left her office, the sun had dipped lower in the sky, painting the street in gold. I carried the papers under my arm, their edges stiff against my side. I walked past the hardware store, past a young couple carrying bags of nails and paint, and I felt a strange clarity. I drove home along the river, the water glinting with the last light of day. I thought about Michael, about how he would rage when he realized the house payments had truly stopped. I thought about Linda, caught in the middle but choosing to believe Victor's lies. And I thought about Victor himself, so certain he had me under his thumb. At home I laid the papers out on the table, spreading them carefully like blueprints. Each mark was a weakness, each irregularity, a step closer to evening the scales. My house was quiet, the kind of quiet that once felt lonely, but now felt like armor. I picked up my pen, drew a slow line under Ellen's final note, and whispered to myself, "Karma has a way of showing up." The folder stayed open long into the night as I prepared my next move. The morning started with a heavy knock on the door, but when I opened it, there was nothing but a courier dropping off a thick envelope. The return address had Victor's firm stamped across the top in bold letters. I carried it to the kitchen table, my stomach already tight. The seal tore easily, and inside I found pages of legal jargon, the words cease and desist appearing more than once. They accused me of interfering with Michael's future, of harassment, of malicious intent. It was a letter meant to scare me. I read it twice, then set it down and poured myself a coffee. The steam curled into the air while my mind stayed still. Fear wanted to rise, but anger kept it down. They thought I would panic. They thought I would fold like I always had. The phone rang before I could finish the cup. The number flashing on the screen was Victor's. I stared at it for a long second, then pressed accept and laid the phone on the table, switching it to speaker. "Robert, you old fool," his voice boomed, slick with that polish he always carried, though now I could hear a crack of rage underneath. "What do you think you're doing? Freezing payments, dragging Michael into the dirt, and I know you're the one stirring trouble with the IRS. You're playing a dangerous game." I leaned back in the chair, the wood creaking under me. Dangerous for who? For the man who's been living off shadows, or for the father who finally decided to stop being a doormat? He laughed, sharp and hollow. "You don't stand a chance against me. I have teams of lawyers who eat men like you for breakfast." "Back off, Robert. Step aside, and maybe I'll convince Michael to forgive you before you lose him completely." The calm in my chest surprised me. "You want me to step aside so you can finish bleeding him dry. You've spent years turning him against me with promises and lies. But you'll find I'm not so easy to erase." His voice rose, sharper now. "Jealousy, that's what this island. You can't handle that Linda chose better, that Michael sees me as the man who gets things done. You're bitter because you're stuck with calloused hands while I build empires." That word jealousy lit a fire inside me. I remembered the barbecue years ago when he raised a glass to new beginnings while I stood off to the side, ignored. I remembered Michael staring at his watch, the one Victor had given him, while I offered him tools for his first apartment. I remembered every smirk, every little dig, every way he had stolen moments that were supposed to belong to me. I gripped the edge of the table, my voice steady. I don't envy a man who cheats his way to glory. I don't envy a man whose foundation is nothing but sand. You think I've lost because I've lived with less, but you don't know the strength that comes from building with your own hands. You can threaten me all you want, Victor. Save it for the judge. Before he could respond, I pressed the end button. The silence that followed filled the kitchen like a heavy blanket. For a moment, I thought it was over, but then came another sound, hard knocks pounding at my front door, each one rattling through the frame. I walked slowly, my steps steady. Through the peephole I saw Michael, his face twisted, his hair wild, his body straining against the porch light. His fists struck the wood again. "Open the door, Dad!" he shouted, his voice raw. "This has gone too far." I kept the chain latched and opened it just a crack. His eyes were blazing, his chest heaving. "You took my truck, you stopped the house, and now Victor's saying you're ruining everything. You're destroying me." I looked at him through the gap, the smell of alcohol drifting off him. "No, son, you're destroying yourself. I warned you. I carried you long enough. It's time you stand on your own." He shoved against the door, the chain straining, wood creaking. For a moment I thought he might break it. His finger jabbed toward me, his voice rising. "You don't get it. Victor's helping me. He's offering loans, a place to stay. You're just bitter because Mom chose better." The words stung, but they didn't break me. I held my ground. "I chose you, Michael. Every sacrifice, every paycheck, every night I went without so you wouldn't. Victor's help is control, nothing more. If you keep leaning on him, you'll fall harder than you ever thought possible." His face twisted, rage spilling over. "You're going to regret this. Victor and I will take everything from you. You'll see." I closed the door slowly, the chain clinking as it settled back into place. His shouts carried through the wood for a while, then faded as his footsteps stormed down the porch. I stood in the hallway long after the night grew quiet again. The cease and desist letter still lay on the table, the ink glaring up at me. The war Victor wanted had officially begun, and my own son was standing on the front line against me. The next evening the knock on my door wasn't frantic. It was steady, deliberate, the kind that told me Michael had come with purpose. I opened it and found him standing there, sober this time, his jaw set, his eyes cold. He stepped inside without waiting for an invitation, his shoulders squared as if he were preparing for battle. The living room lamp cast a soft glow, catching the lines in his face that made him look older than 30. He didn't sit. He paced, running a hand through his hair, his footsteps heavy on the worn wood. Finally he turned to me and spoke, his voice hard. "This has to stop, Dad. You can't just take everything away from me. I talked to Victor, and he's ready to back me up in court if you don't fix this. I'm giving you one chance to make it right." I leaned against the arm of the chair, arms crossed, my voice calm. "One chance for what, Michael? To go back to paying your bills while you spit in my face? To keep pouring into a pit that never fills? That chance is gone." His eyes narrowed. "So you're just going to ruin me? Is that what this is about? Getting revenge because I told the truth at dinner?" I took a step toward him, my gaze steady. "You didn't tell the truth. You repeated Victor's poison. You've been repeating it for years. And now you want to stand here and threaten me with lawsuits? Son, I've carried you too long to be afraid of you." He jabbed a finger at me, his voice rising. "You don't understand. Victor has real plans. He knows people. He can make things happen. He says, I've been wasting my life listening to you, that you've been holding me back because you're afraid I'll outgrow you." I shook my head slowly. "You think I was holding you back? Every dime I gave, every hour I worked overtime, every roof I put over your head that wasn't holding you back, that was giving you space to stand up. But you never stood. You leaned. And now you're leaning on a man who will use you up and toss you aside." His face twisted with anger. He took a step closer, close enough that I could see the twitch in his jaw, the redness in his eyes. For a moment, I thought he might raise his hand. The tension crackled in the air between us, sharp and dangerous. But he didn't. He pulled back, fists clenched at his sides, shaking with frustration. "You think you're the only one who sacrificed? You think you're the hero here?" His words came out ragged. "You're bitter, Dad. Bitter that Mom found someone better. Bitter that Victor has what you never did. Admit it." The heat rose in me, but I kept my voice low. "Better? He bought his way in while I built with my bare hands. He flashes money while I built a life brick by brick. If that's what you call better, then maybe you deserve to follow him. But don't confuse his control with love. Don't confuse his greed with wisdom." Michael turned away, pacing again, his steps fast, restless. He stopped at the mantel and knocked a frame off balance. The family photo tilted, the faces from years ago staring sideways at the room. He looked at it, then turned back to me, his voice breaking through the tension. "I'm homeless because of you. I have nothing because of you. If you don't fix this, I'll join Victor's suit. We'll take everything you've got." I walked toward him slowly, each step deliberate. The air felt thick, the walls pressing close. When I was just a few feet away, I spoke, each word heavy. "Sue me if you want. Throw every threat you can. The truth is on my side, and deep down you know it. I won't hand you a life anymore. You want one, you build it." His chest rose and fell fast, his fists trembling. Then, with a growl of frustration, he stormed toward the door. He yanked it open and slammed it behind him so hard the frame rattled. The sound echoed through the house long after he was gone. I stood in the silence, my breath steady, my heart heavy. Through the window I watched him stride down the street, his figure swallowed by the dark. The night settled again, but the air was charged, humming with the clash that had just torn through my living room. My son had given me an ultimatum, and I had given him the only answer I could. The notice came on a Wednesday morning. I saw the sheriff's car pull up to Michael's house as I drove by on my way back from the supply store. The cruiser idled at the curb, lights off but presence unmistakable. I slowed and watched through the windshield as a deputy stepped out, a man in his 50s with a clipboard tucked under his arm. He walked to the front door and taped a folded paper just above the handle. The sound of the tape tearing free carried across the quiet street. I didn't stop. I kept driving, but the image stayed with me. The bold letters of notice to vacate were burned into my mind. It was official now. Michael had 30 days to leave. My hands tightened on the wheel as I turned down the block, past rows of houses with trimmed lawns and children's bikes scattered in driveways. His house looked different, tired, a shadow of the promise it once carried. That evening I drove back by. The notice was still there, the edges flapping in the breeze. Curtains twitched as neighbors peeked out, their curiosity impossible to hide. A couple walking their dogs slowed to read it before moving on. The gossip would spread fast. Michael had always wanted to be seen as someone important, and now he was being seen for the wrong reasons. Through the window I caught a glimpse of him pacing, phone pressed to his ear, his free hand waving in frustration. Even from the street I could tell he was shouting. He looked thinner, worn, his hair uncombed, his movements frantic. The sight made my stomach twist, but I stayed where I was. This was the consequence he had earned. The next day I heard from Claire. She called me in the afternoon, her voice heavy with sadness. "Dad, he's telling everyone you betrayed him. He says you left him on the street." I closed my eyes, the ache deep in my chest. "He's not on the street yet. He's had years of my help. He chose Victor's promises over my sacrifices. Now he has to live with the choice." She sighed. "I know, it hurts to hear him so lost. He doesn't sound like himself anymore." After we hung up, I sat on the porch with a glass of water and watched the sun dip behind the trees. The neighborhood was quiet, but my mind was restless. I thought of Michael as a boy, running barefoot through the yard, his laughter ringing out. I thought of the treehouse we built together, hammering boards into place while he climbed up to hand me nails. That boy was gone, replaced by a man who couldn't see past his own anger. A few nights later, unable to sleep, I drove past again. The lights were out in the house, but the truck I had taken back was gone from the driveway, replaced by an unfamiliar sedan. Boxes were stacked near the window, cardboard edges visible through the glass. He was packing. The sight cut through me, sharp and final. I slowed, pulling to the curb a few houses down. I sat there with the engine running, the dashboard light casting a dim glow across my hands. I could see him through the front door, carrying a box, his shoulders slumped. For once there was no swagger, no bravado, just a man cornered by the weight of his own choices. He stepped outside for a smoke, the porch light flickering above him. His face looked hollow, drawn tight with worry. He leaned against the railing and pulled out his phone, scrolling, waiting. After a while, he pressed it to his ear, pacing back and forth. I could almost hear the desperation in his movements. Whoever he was calling wasn't answering. I sat there longer than I should have, hidden in the shadows of the street. Part of me wanted to get out, to walk up and tell him to come home, that I'd help him through this one last time. But another part reminded me of all the nights I had already done that, all the rescues that had only chained us both tighter. When I finally pulled away, I drove down to the river and parked by the water. The current moved slow, reflecting the pale light of the moon. I rolled down the window and let the cool night air wash over me. My chest ached with grief and pride tangled together. Grief for the boy I had raised, pride for the man I was finally choosing to be. The eviction notice wasn't just a piece of paper taped to a door. It was the line drawn in ink and wood and silence. Michael would either learn to walk on his own, or he would fall. But it would no longer be my back carrying the weight. I sat by the river until the first hint of dawn, watching the water move steady and sure, the way I needed to move now. It was a week after the notice when the call came. I was in the garage fixing a loose hinge on the workbench, the kind of small job that keeps your hands busy while your mind runs free. The phone buzzed on the shelf, Michael's name glowing across the screen. I almost let it ring out, but something in me made me swipe to answer. His voice hit me before I could say a word. "Dad, please. I don't know what to do. The eviction is real. I'm packing everything. I've got nowhere to go." His words tumbled out fast, sharp with panic. I set the screwdriver down and leaned against the bench. "You've had plenty of time to figure things out, Michael. I told you this was coming." He sniffed, his breathing ragged. "Victor said I could stay at his place for a while, but it's not the same. He doesn't want me around for long. He keeps talking about business, about how I have to prove myself. But I don't have anything, Dad. I don't even have a car now. I can't do this." I closed my eyes, the sound of his desperation pulling at something deep inside me. For a moment I saw him as a boy again, standing by my side after a storm knocked out the power, clutching my hand while I started the generator. Back then he believed I could fix anything. "Michael," I said quietly, "this is the life you've chosen. You called me a loser and ran to a man who only shines when things are easy. Now you're seeing the other side of it." His voice cracked, words spilling out in a rush. "I'll apologize. I'll cut ties with Victor if that's what you want. Just don't let me end up on the street. Please, Dad, just this once." The phrase stung. Just this once. I had heard it too many times, every request painted as temporary, every promise broken by the next call for help. My fingers curled into a fist against the bench. "It hasn't been just once, Michael. It's been my whole life. Every bill, every loan, every repair, every mess. I can't keep doing it." Silence stretched on the line, broken only by his shaky breathing. When he spoke again, his voice was smaller. "I don't know how to start over. I've never had to. You were always there." I swallowed hard. "That's exactly why you need to do it now. No more rescues. You find a way. You get a job, any job, and you stand on your own 2 feet. I'm done holding you up." His words faltered, desperate. "You're going to let me fall like this? After everything? I'm your son." The ache in my chest grew heavy, but my voice stayed firm. "Being my son doesn't mean living off me forever. It means carrying the lessons I've given you. Right now, the only lesson left is consequence." There was a long pause, then the sound of him crying softly, muffled and raw. It was the first time I'd heard him sound truly broken, not angry, not proud, but emptied out. I almost gave in. I almost told him to come home, that I'd cover the rent until he found his footing. But then I thought of every moment leading here. The truck tossed aside as not good enough. The house treated like a hotel. The dinner table insult, the word loser slamming into me. I couldn't unhear those things, and I couldn't let them keep repeating. "I'll always be your father," I said finally, my voice steady. "But I won't be your crutch anymore. When you're ready to build your life, call me. Until then, you're on your own." I ended the call before he could answer. The click echoed in the garage, louder than any slam of a door. I stood there a long time, staring at the tools laid out on the bench, the smell of oil and wood filling the air. My hands itched to fix something, but this wasn't a hinge or a broken step. This was my son's life, and only he could repair it now. Later that night, I drove past his house again. The moving truck was in the driveway, headlights glowing in the dark as men carried boxes down the steps. Michael stood on the porch, his head in his hands, shoulders slumped in a way I had never seen. The sight cut deep, but I didn't stop. I drove on, the road stretching dark and empty ahead of me, the hum of the engine steady under my hands. He had reached the bottom. Whether he stayed there or climbed out was no longer mine to decide. It was 2 weeks after Michael's eviction notice when the first crack in Victor's armor appeared. I was sitting at the kitchen table with the morning paper, the radio humming softly in the background when I heard his name. The announcer's voice was calm but firm. Local businessman Victor Lawson faces questions as federal auditors review discrepancies in his company's tax filings. Sources say clients have begun pulling out of contracts. I set the paper down, my heart steady but my mind sharp. I listened as they went on about inflated deductions, questionable transfers, whispers of fraud. The same irregularities Ellen had shown me were now headlines. My coffee tasted different that morning, stronger somehow. By noon my phone buzzed. It was Linda. Her voice was strained, almost unrecognizable. "Robert, have you seen the news? They're investigating Victor. His accounts are being looked at. He's falling apart." I leaned back in my chair, the wood pressing into my back. "I've seen it." She went quiet for a moment, then her words spilled out. "Everything we thought was steady is unraveling. The investors are gone. He's snapping at everyone, even Michael. He says people are watching him, that the walls are closing in." I closed my eyes and let the silence stretch before I spoke. "Karma has a way of catching up, Linda. You build on lies. Eventually the truth knocks it down." That evening I turned on the local news. The camera showed Victor walking into a building, his suit wrinkled, his expression tight. Reporters shouted questions about tax fraud, about frozen accounts. He kept his head down, pushing past them without a word. It was the first time I had seen him without that smug smile. Michael called me that night. His voice was hoarse, trembling. "Dad, Victor's in trouble. Clients are leaving him. He says it's all lies, but he's different now. He's angry, cold. He told me there's no room for me anymore, that I need to handle my own mess." He threw me out. I gripped the phone, the weight of his words sinking in. "I told you, son, his help comes with strings, and when the strings break, you're left with nothing." Michael's voice cracked. "I see it now. I should have listened. I thought he was the answer, but he was just using me." I let out a long breath, staring out the window into the dark street beyond. Seeing it is the first step, but now it's up to you to change. Over the next few days, the news grew worse for Victor. One night they showed footage of his office building with workers carrying out boxes, the company logo being taken down. Another report spoke of fines, of accounts frozen, of federal agents digging deeper. The empire he had bragged about for years was crumbling brick by brick. I went to the diner one morning for breakfast and overheard 2 men at the counter talking about him. "Thought he was untouchable," one said, shaking his head. "Turns out he was just another crook hiding behind expensive suits." The other laughed bitterly. "Always knew he was too slick. Should have seen it sooner." I sipped my coffee quietly, saying nothing, but inside I felt a grim satisfaction. Not joy, not triumph, but something heavier. Justice. Linda called again later that week. Her voice was broken this time, no sharp edges left. "Robert, I don't know what to do. The house, the bills, everything's falling apart. Victor's not the man I thought he was. He keeps saying it's just temporary, but I can see the fear in his eyes." I stood at the window, the late afternoon light casting long shadows across the floor. "You made your choice, Linda. You believed in flash instead of foundation. Now you're seeing the cost." She started to cry, quiet sobs muffled over the line. I just don't want Michael to suffer for our mistakes. I closed my eyes, remembering the boy Michael once was, the boy who used to sit on the porch steps waiting for me to come home. He's already suffered, but maybe now he'll learn. Maybe now you will too. After I hung up, I stepped outside. The air was cool, the sky painted with streaks of pink and orange. I walked to the edge of the yard and looked up at the evening stars beginning to show. Victor had thought he could take everything from me, thought he could erase me from my own family. But the truth had caught him. The lies he built his empire on had turned to dust. I stood there a long time, the quiet settling over me. Karma had done its work. What came next would be between me and my son. It was a quiet Sunday evening when I heard the knock. Not heavy, not angry, just a hesitant tap against the wood. I rose from my chair and walked slowly to the door. When I opened it, Michael stood there. His shoulders slumped, his hands shoved deep into his jacket pockets. The porch light caught the dark circles under his eyes, the way his jaw trembled as if he had rehearsed what he wanted to say 100 times and still wasn't sure it would come out right. "Dad," he said, his voice low, "can I come in?" I stepped aside and let him in. He didn't walk far, just stood near the mantel, his eyes landing on the old family photo. For a moment he stared at it, then looked down at the floor. I waited, letting the silence stretch. Finally he spoke. "I've been staying at Victor's these past few weeks. At first it felt like a palace compared to what I had. Big house, expensive furniture, everything shining. But it was cold, Dad. Cold in a way that money can't warm." He barely looked at me. He just talked about deals, about people turning on him, about the walls closing in. I thought he was my future, but I was just another pawn. His voice cracked, and he pulled a crumpled envelope from his jacket pocket. "I wrote you a letter. I tried to get it all down, but I wanted to tell you in person too. I messed up. I took everything you gave me for granted. I called you names while living off the work of your hands. I thought Victor was strength, but all he gave me were lies. I'm sorry, Dad. I'm so sorry." I looked at him, this grown man who suddenly looked like the boy I used to carry on my shoulders. My throat tightened. I crossed my arms to keep them steady. "Words are a start, Michael. But words won't rebuild what you broke. What matters now is what you do." He nodded quickly, his eyes wet. "I know. I've already started looking for work. There's a job interview tomorrow at the lumber yard. Manual labor. Nothing fancy, but it's honest. I don't expect you to fix anything anymore. I just wanted you to hear me say it. I want to stand on my own this time." At that moment, Claire's key turned in the front door. She stepped inside, carrying a bag of groceries. She froze when she saw Michael. Her eyes flicked between us, reading the weight of the moment. "Everything okay?" she asked gently. Michael turned toward her, his voice softer than I'd heard in years. "I told Dad I was wrong. I told him I need to change." Claire set the bag on the counter and walked over, her hand resting lightly on his arm. "That's all we ever wanted, Michael, for you to see the truth." We sat at the table together for the first time in what felt like forever. The meal was simple, sandwiches and chips, nothing like the roast chicken from that night that started it all. But there was no shouting this time, no slammed plates, just quiet conversation, hesitant but real. When we finished, Michael stood and extended his hand across the table. His grip was firm, not desperate, not entitled, just steady. "Thank you for not giving up on me completely," he said. I shook his hand and held his gaze. "You're still my son, but the support ends here. From now on, you earn what you keep. That's the only way respect is built." He nodded, accepting the boundary. For the first time, I believed he meant it. Later, after they both left, I stepped out onto the porch. The air was cool, the night sky spread wide above me. The stars shimmered faintly, the same stars I had stared at weeks ago when I decided enough was enough. I leaned against the railing and let the quiet wrap around me. Michael had returned with apologies and a promise, but promises were fragile. I didn't know if he would truly change. I didn't know if the path ahead would hold more pain or a new beginning. What I did know was that I had drawn the line and kept it, and for once he had faced me with humility instead of anger. I stood there a long while, watching the night settle over the street. Somewhere in the distance a dog barked, a car engine started, life moving on. I raised my eyes back to the stars and whispered a thought I didn't speak aloud. Let him climb this time. Let him finally learn. The porch light flickered, the shadows stretched across the yard, and I stayed there, caught between the ache of the past and the faint hope of what might still come. In the end, I didn't win by shouting or by force. I won by stepping back and letting the truth do its work. Victor's empire crumbled under its own lies, and Michael finally saw the difference between hollow promises and real sacrifice. Whether he truly changes is a path only he can walk, but the line has been drawn and my dignity remains. Sometimes the hardest love is the love that lets go. What would you have done if you were in my place? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories.